Welcome to the official podcast of DogsDaily.com, a Sports Illustrated channel.
Gets to the edge. Sonny Michel will send the Dogs home to the championship game.
If you're looking for the latest Georgia Bulldog news in football, basketball, baseball, and recruiting, then you're in the right place.
Anthony Edwards with the jam. Are you kidding me?
Hosted by Dogs Daily writers Jeremiah Stoddard, Kyle Funderburk, and Jonathan Williams.
Here's a pitch. Hit high out into right center with some carry. It's got a chance. This ball is out of here. Tucker Bradley has won it.
Just sit back, relax, and prepare yourself for these hot takes you're about to listen to.
All right, welcome back to another episode of Classic City Sports. As always, Jeremiah Stoddard along with Jonathan Williams here. It is Florida Hate Week Part 2. We tiptoed around it a little bit last week because we still had to kind of cover a little bit of the Kentucky game last week as well. But this week, it's officially the full week of hating on Florida. So I'm going to kick it over to Jonathan here in just a second for the opening part of that. But we'll cover, what we expect to see a little bit. And then we'll talk about, everybody's favorite topic with Florida right now. It seems, especially in the national media, has kind of picked up some different things here and there about Dan Mullen. So we'll kind of go over all that. But just the first thing I'll say, we'll start on the offense for Georgia going up against Florida. What's like the first little bit that you're kind of looking to see?
I think you got to attack them first and foremost is just to establish the run game. I think that's a big thing to establish early on for Georgia. Get your running backs going, get them good touches. Just early on in the downs, first, even second down, just even if you not even necessarily trying to get first downs on those plays, but, getting good chunks of yardage out of those, 4 or 5 yards a game or gain every time you get them a touch. I think that's a big thing because establishing the run game, of course, is going to help open up the passing game. And then also just, I think if you can just really not necessarily kill the clock, but if you can just really dominate time of possession and just wear their defense down quickly because they don't rotate a lot like Georgia does. They don't have the depth that Georgia does. So if you wear them down early on in the run game, that's a great way to do it. Really wear down their defensive line early on, get the running backs moving around, make them have to really think on defense and just make decisions and think about where the play is going. I think that's a great start for Georgia to really establish on offense, of course, running game, which they've had success doing the past couple of weeks in their games is getting the run game going. It's looked really good between Zamir and James Cook. And then you'll probably get Kenny McIntosh back hopefully this week, especially now with Kendall Milton going down with his injury, and he's going to be done for a couple weeks now or more than a couple weeks. But so getting those three guys some touches, getting them going early on, I think that's a big thing for Georgia offensively. And then whoever's at quarterback, we don't really know, probably won't know until the start of the game. But just opening up the passing game enough to where you really don't – it's not a big thing, but just enough to where you can keep it open and you just have to keep them honest on defense.
Yeah, absolutely. And as always, I like to say this part. It is October 27th, Wednesday at about 6:15 right now. As you can tell, we're getting ready for the Braves game. That's why we're recording a little bit.
Hawks
and the Hawks
too.
But
we're more focused on the
I
Braves.
am not watching the Hawks game tonight, I can tell you that much.
I don't know that many people will be.
No. But anyway, so that's why we're recording a little bit earlier in the evening than normal. Usually we're about 7:30 or so at this point probably, but we're trying to get it knocked out a little bit earlier to give ourselves a little time to get home, all that good stuff. But to kind of touch base on what you're talking about there as well, Georgia's done a phenomenal job of getting off to a hot start against most teams. There's been a game or two, Clemson, they struggled a little bit early just because first game of the year, a lot of different things go into that game specifically, but there's been a couple games in the year where they've slow started a little bit in first quarter, but typically they score in the first quarter. Georgia's literally scored 94 of their 269 points in the first quarter. So they score a ton there. And it kind of gradually slows through the rest of the game. The middle part is pretty consistent. They scored 67 points in the second quarter and 68 points in the third quarter. And then obviously it drops in the fourth quarter for Georgia down to 40 points because at that point they're just kind of letting the clock run and get that time of possession and in the game more than anything. So Georgia's MO this year has been to get on a hot start and then keep their foot on the gas until that fourth quarter for the most part. They're pretty consistent in the middle part of the game. And I mean, to me, that's what they've got to do again. You've got to make Florida get put on their heels so they struggle on their offense trying to, get the ball pushed downfield and make big plays that way. But on the offensive side for Georgia, I expect them to go out there and attack those run lanes quick and get that movement. So that way, whoever the quarterback might be when that game does, get going, they have the ability to look downfield a little bit more themselves because that Florida defense has to kind of counteract that run game that Georgia starts off with. I do expect a little bit of that as well. And as far as the quarterback stuff goes, I mean, you don't really know what's going to happen. I'd be willing to bet that JT plays. He probably starts, in my opinion. That's a personal opinion. That's not based on anything crazy. I'm pretty confident he's coming back in this game overall. And if he is coming back, I would really be surprised to see him not start it. Now, with that being said, I would also be very surprised if I didn't see Stetson Bennett in that game early enough to where it's still like a game. I think he's kind of earned that right at this point. And I think as Georgia fans, you can't even be that upset about that when you see it. If JT's fully healthy, JT's definitely your guy. But at this point, we're at week 7. And Stetson started the majority of the games this year and played very well overall. You can't complain about his performance. I think he's got 11 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, something like that.
Over 900 passing yards.
And the last game was a 250-yard performance. You can't get what more is he supposed to do? Yeah, I mean, I know there's little pieces of his game that you may not be a huge fan of, but he brings some stuff to the table that JT can't do either. So it kind of balances a little bit there. While once again, I still think JT's got to be your guy if he's 100% healthy. So he's going to play the majority of the game, and you'll probably see. In my opinion, I think the game's going to kind of slip away from Florida late, and so you might see a little bit more Stetson late in the game if that is the case.
Yeah, and I think another big thing for Georgia offensively, just where the state of Florida is in this season, already 3 losses. Playoffs aren't looking, or not even looking like that. They're out of the picture now. Going to Atlanta, out of the picture now. So if you get up on these guys early, chances are they're probably just going to roll over and take their loss. Kind of like, you go into this game expecting like, it's probably not going to be close for us. It might stay close early on. Adrenaline's high and energy's high. So guys are flying around early on in the game making plays. But if Georgia gets out in front early, which I think they will, just as you said, Todd Monken's done a really good job at drawing up great first drive game plans to where they score points very early on, and then they just keep punching you in the mouth until you just roll over and die eventually. And so I think that's kind of what's going to happen this week again. And I'll also go back to this. Just talking about Stetson Bennett, I mean, he really doesn't even look like the same player that he was last year in 2020.
No, he's different.
It's kind of one of those things where he was sustainable enough to where he was your starting quarterback, and he had definitely earned that job, of course. But it was also like he would kind of make some terrible decisions every now and then. Didn't really protect the ball enough to where you could rely on him every single time. But this year, you haven't seen that at all from him. He's made great decisions. He's not turning the ball over at all. He's leading this offense. He looks like he looks comfortable in that role right now, commanding this offense, being a leader on that offense. And then another big thing that you really didn't see last year is that this year he's hitting his deep shots and his explosive plays to his receivers down the field. Well, last year that was a big struggle for Georgia. It never seemed like Georgia really hit on those deep shots or those explosive plays until JT Daniels took over in the later part of this season. So Stetson Bennett is not the same player that he was last year. And I think that's a big reason why Georgia has had even more success this season and why they are leaps and bounds ahead of everybody else right now compared to any other team in college football right now. So you have 2 quarterbacks that you can count on to go out there, win you ball games, run the offense, and be leaders out there. So it's really not, to me, it doesn't matter a whole lot who starts. I do think, though, if you want JT Daniels to be your starting quarterback for the rest of the season, it's got to be this week that you roll him out there, because it gets to a point where it's too late to kind of start rolling him in there and make him your starter. I get that JT Daniels is the more talented guy. Nobody's questioning that, but it's just a point where, like, if you're in there week 9 and you still haven't seen JT Daniels, I think there comes a point where you just got to roll with Stetson, and then JT can come back next year if he wants to or whatnot. But either way, quarterback I don't think is going to matter much for this game or really any other remaining game on the regular season schedule.
Absolutely agree there. And yeah, I think last year was a very different Stetson Bennett for sure. Like you said, it really was a very different Stetson Bennett. And I think that's why there's still a conversation of who's going to be the guy like when JT becomes healthy. And the national media has really, really tried to push the quarterback like controversy for Georgia kind of thing. They really have a ton, and that's been since like the UAB game. I think Robert Griffin III was the first one to sit here on air, start talking about like a potential quarterback controversy. And it just each week they got a little bit more into that conversation on there. But I think you're right. I think at this point, like if you're not going to make the change right now and give it back to JT, it's going to be one of those things that it gets more and more difficult to turn it back over to JT later on. I don't think any Georgia fan is really making the argument that JT isn't the more talented guy.
Yeah.
I don't know that Kirby would make the argument that JT isn't the more talented guy overall. Well, I mean, shoot, he basically said that in a different way the other day when he was talking about it. When he was asked about it, he basically said that both quarterbacks would get some time in there. But in that same comment, he was saying, it depended on your game style that you were going against Florida with. And the first part of it was, with Stetson, if you're really wanting to press that running game and get your quarterback involved in that side of it, it's going to be him that way. But then his own words were something along the lines of, if you want somebody that's a little bit more accurate of a passer and stronger arm kind of thing like that, then you're going to go with JT. So he essentially said that JT was the more talented guy without saying it and being completely rude about it. But like he basically told you if we need a guy that can get in there and throw the ball consistently, throw it 25, 30 times, it's got to be JT. It's not going to be Stetson. Stetson's most attempts was 20 in a game?
Yeah, something like that.
Something like that. And but I would agree as well with you that, I'm pretty sure that even with Stetson last year, which Brooks Austin dropped a little bit of information on him from last year, by the way, earlier, last week sometime, I believe. So that's some information. If you weren't following him, you should probably check out his stuff. He had some inside information to give on that. But even in that game against Florida, you know how he played against Bama? That's the one that everybody focused on first. The second game that he has as a loss as a starter was against Florida. But against Florida, if I remember correctly, didn't Georgia jump out to a 2-touchdown lead early in that game? And then it all came unraveled once Stetson hurt his shoulder.
Yeah.
He got hit hard and like completely screwed up his shoulder. And after that is when he kept trying to play and it was his throwing shoulder that was messed up.
You could tell he didn't look the same after he hurt his shoulder.
No, I mean, he was like grimacing when he tried to even release the ball at all, like when he tried to move his arm. And so after that, all of a sudden he couldn't hit those deep targets anymore. Because before that, he was making plays. Mm-hmm. He was doing pretty well. And then we went over to Mathis played a little bit, and he wasn't playing well at all. And that's how that game got away on there. But to be fair for the mailman, I think if he stayed healthy that whole game, it could have gone completely different as well. It could have been a different outcome against against Florida last year had he stayed healthy that whole game and didn't hurt his shoulder. Because I'm pretty positive, I should have looked this up beforehand, I wasn't even thinking about it, but pretty positive they started out 14-0, were up 14 over Florida.
I mean, they scored on the first play of the game was Zamir.
Yeah, and then I'm pretty sure they got something a little bit later, like early in the first quarter.
I believe it was the touchdown to Rosemy where he broke his ankle. I think
that was 14-0, right? Yeah, so it was like 14-0 after the broken ankle. That was also disgusting to see, and CBS showed it like 6 times. That's what they do.
Yeah.
And it's after that happened, and then he hurt his shoulder, it unraveled a little bit, and that's when the game just got away from Florida or away from Georgia, and Florida pulled away from it. But at the same time, there was a few plays late in that game in the second half where Georgia could have got back in the game had one or two of those passes deep downfield hit that Mathis couldn't hit or anything like that, and he was overthrowing people that were open. Some of that stuff could have changed.
Yeah, and I think people forget. I believe it was a 10-point game with maybe like 10 minutes or 8 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. And the whole second half, pretty much, Georgia's defense figured something out. They were stopping Florida on a consistent basis, and they were keeping Georgia in it, giving them countless of opportunities to go and score and bring it in a little closer. And Todd Monken had a beautiful game plan drawn up. I mean, there were wide open guys running down the field, but as we said, Dwan Mathis or Stetson Bennett in the second half just couldn't hit them. You saw them. I mean, there was probably 4 throws where Dwan Mathis either overthrew or underthrew a guy that was down the field, just pretty much wide open. If he hits him in stride or even hits him at all, it's probably a touchdown. So Georgia was in that game until the very end. No doubt.
Didn't feel like it.
Yeah,
when you look at it, like one, when watching the game, it didn't feel like it, and 2, by like the final score of it, it really didn't feel like it as much either. But I mean, realistically, they were kind of in that game at the late in the game on it, and this is kind of what I think is going to happen on there. I do believe that Florida stays in the game for a little bit. I think the first quarter is going to be close still, unless Georgia comes out and just throws haymakers, which is possible. You never know. But I think it'll be closer through the first quarter. Georgia takes, a little bit of a 7 to 10 point lead, maybe into in the second quarter going into halftime. And then in the third quarter, mid third quarter is when they're going to start pulling away more. Fourth quarter is going to be over. I think starting the fourth quarter, I think the game's over.
And this is where I think that this is where the game is going to be decided, as it's been decided every single week pretty much, is whenever Georgia's defense is out there. And Brooks Austin posted a video today. It was really good. Talked about what to expect from Florida on offense. And Florida's offensive line has been this way now for the last 3 or 4 years. They haven't exactly been an elite group of players up front at Florida for a long time. And it's the same story this year. They got some guys that can get some movement on you. They got some big dudes up there, so they can push you around a little bit. But nobody's pushed Georgia's defensive line or front seven at all around at all. And then I don't think it matters if people would talk about Emory Jones starting or Anthony Richardson starting. None of that matters either. I don't think Georgia's going to get pressure on both of those guys. And if you look at the tape for both of them, anytime they get pressure in their face, or even if you don't get pressure in their face, anytime that they feel like something is going wrong, they're going to try and take off running because that's where they feel most comfortable in their game is with their legs, making plays with the legs. And that's where they're the most lethal. But I just think Georgia's defense is going to really shut down that offense. I don't think they give them much to do at all. Brooks also talked about how Florida doesn't have like a vertical threat on offense at all. And that's one of the ways that you have to attack this Georgia defense is vertically. And they don't have a vertical threat to attack Georgia. They don't have a Kyle Pitts like they did last year. Mm-hmm. So I think with those things, I just don't think that this game really stays close very long at all. I think it could get out of hand in the second quarter pretty early or whatnot. I think it could be 17-0 or even 21-0 very quickly, in my opinion. So,
I think if it goes that route, it gets ugly and just keeps getting ugly.
Yeah,
I think if it does start where like the first quarter or going into the second quarter, something like that, it's a 14 to 17 point game. By halftime, it's going to be a 20-something point game probably. And by the end of it, I feel like Kirby is going to – he's going to have his slogan just going through his head and just really put the foot on the gas and
FTMF,
win by,
if you're wondering what that slogan is, FTMF. So,
and he's going to win by like 45 at that point. If it gets like that, if it gets that bad at the beginning, I think it continues to get worse at that point.
And Emory and Anthony Richardson have both shown where they're already not the best decision makers anyways. So if you get up on them early and you're forcing them to have to think and try and make big plays, I think they're going to start forcing stuff even more. And I think that's another area where the game could really just start getting out of hand if Georgia gets 2 or 3 turnovers against Florida and they just keep giving the ball back to Georgia. And if Georgia's running the ball at will, I think it definitely gets out of hand very quickly. And we also don't know how Kirby will take this game, like you said. If he has that FTMF mentality
especially after losing last year.
Yeah, I mean, nobody hates Florida more than Kirby Smart does, so I think he's definitely coming for revenge. I think all these players are coming for revenge. There's tons of guys, the seniors, that don't want to leave Georgia with losing to Florida again. Yeah, so it's not at all. I think if it gets ugly early, it's going to get really ugly, in my opinion. It's going to be really bad for Florida. So
yeah, I think so, and I think to kind of go back to what you said a little bit ago as well. I think the reason that Brooks Austin, and we've sat here and different things like that, but the reason he points out that you have to have a vertical threat against Georgia in order to really press them, I mean, it's because everybody knows how good that front seven of Georgia is and that defensive line specifically. And if you're not pulling back those linebackers and making them get more involved in the passing defensive side of it, and you let them focus on that run game and those gaps and quarterback pressuring that way, and you don't make them actually cover people, it's going to be a long night for your quarterback and for those running backs trying to run it all, because that front seven's not going to do what Alabama did and let them run for 250 yards against Georgia's defense. It's just not going to happen. And if that's what your game plan is to try to do, then it really, really, really will get extremely ugly, and it will do it very quickly, because I think Georgia's coming out there swinging early. I think they are going to try to score. You're going to see some big plays drawn up from Georgia pretty early in that game, and so if Florida comes back on the other side and tries to run the ball on the other side, it will get out of hand pretty quickly that way. But I think what could happen with that is they don't have a vertical game. They really don't. But if Georgia gets out there and scores quickly and scores fast a couple times, say they scored and it gets to 14-0, at that point, Florida's going to start trying to do stuff that they don't do and that they can't really do. And it's going to unravel very quickly for them. So I think that's the risk that Florida runs by trying to have that same game plan. If they don't adjust it and, really counteract what Georgia throws out there to begin with, they're not going to be able to keep up at all.
Yeah, and the whole reason why they made it a close game again with Alabama is because they were just running Alabama to death offensively. They were creating huge gaps in Alabama's defensive line and just running at will. And nobody's done that against Georgia this season. And so that's been Florida's MO on offense is we got to get the run game going first and foremost, because Dan Mullen has probably learned he can't trust his quarterbacks to lead this offense consistently enough down the field to put up points. And so if you shut down that run game early, which Georgia will, again, it's just going to be a rough day for Florida's offense because you're going to make them one-dimensional, and that offense is not built to be one-dimensional at all. They don't have a Kyle Trask, Kyle Pitts combo, like I said, this year to where they can really heavily rely on the passing game. They don't have those playmakers anymore. They don't have a Kadarius Toney that they can go for a bailout, screen pass, pick up a quick 10, 12 yards every time. So Georgia's going to make them one-dimensional. They're going to shut down that run game, and it's just not going to be a good day for Florida from the looks of things, in my opinion.
No, and I agree, and we'll give an official score prediction at the end of the show, and because that'll be a good way to end it up and close everything out. But, I mean, as far as that goes on the Georgia defensive side, I think this is a really good matchup for Georgia in that side of it because, once again, that rushing defense for Georgia has been top tier. I mean, the entire defense of Georgia is top tier. There's a reason they are number one in the country on that for all categories.
Mm-hmm.
They are those guys. So you have that against a team that tries to run the ball so heavily. And so that's a perfect matchup for Georgia. You have a young secondary in Georgia as well that has shown a few plays like where they've been able to get beat on that vertical threat. But you have a team that has, as Brooks Austin said in his film review today, they don't have any dudes on the outside, meaning receivers. They don't create enough separation, and they won't be able to really burn Georgia's defensive backs on there. So, I mean, it's just overall, it's a really good matchup for Georgia's defense against that offense. And that's why, I think both of us are saying, it could very well get ugly for Florida. You think it might get a little bit uglier, a little faster, which my thing is if it does, then it's just going to get like a slaughterhouse.
Spirals out of control.
It's just going to be, if it starts like that, it's going to get so bad.
Yeah.
It really will.
I mean, Florida has done this multiple times too. A big thing this year is that if you get in 3rd and long against Georgia, you're done. Like, you have no chance of getting a first down if you're in 3rd and long against Georgia. And Florida has shown multiple times where their go-to play call on 3rd and long is a QB power. And if that's your plan on 3rd and long to try and pick up maybe a first down or even just get it
3 yards at best.
Yeah, and it's not going to set you up to where you can't even go for it on 4th down if you're in that territory. So
yeah,
it's just nothing looks favorable for Florida in this game. There's really nothing in their game plan looks like this is an area where they could beat Georgia. And so now that we're saying we think this game is going to get out of control, this is where we could kind of shift the conversation of. There's been some talk about how if this game does get out of control, like many are thinking, and Dan Mullen and his team go into Jacksonville this year and just get absolutely throttled, get their 4th loss of the season very early or midway through the season.
Week 8.
Yeah.
Or game 8, week 9.
Yeah, with 4 games remaining or so.
You're going to come in 4-4.
Yeah.
Yeesh.
That there's
That's
talk
rough.
that this could be the nail in the coffin for Dan Mullen this season. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think at what point do you call it? You saw last year, and last year was their good year, and they still ended with 4 losses last year.
8-4.
8-4 last year, and if what happen like that we're talking about does in fact happen, that means they're going to leave Jacksonville in week 9 4-4 already.
Yeah.
And at that point, you've got to think that there's nobody buying into them in the program anymore. You got to think the kids. You'll probably see some people start hitting the transfer portal. You'll see people giving up on it. And I think because I think most people have given up on Dan Mullen as well in general. I think at this point you can even ask Florida fans.
Oh, yeah.
And most Florida fans, most of them don't think it's going to be that good of a game anymore.
Mm-hmm.
They don't expect to win. I've heard quite a few say that. There's still the occasional out there that are still confident for some reason. I don't know why. But a lot of them have started to say that they are no longer confident in Dan Mullen themselves. And so you've lost the fan base. You're definitely going to be losing players. I can't imagine that being any different. And especially if it gets out of hand in Jacksonville and it's a 25-plus point win or something like that, I would not be surprised to see Dan Mullen fired in the next week afterwards. It wouldn't surprise me if they don't do it right away at that point. And he won't get the courtesy that Coach O just got and get to finish out the year, they'll let him go right away.
Yeah, and
he may not be back in Gainesville before he's fired.
Yeah, that's a possibility too, and it's just like you can already kind of see like the colors changing over there. Like there's been I think 2 decommits from Florida right now already midway through the season. Shamar James was one, and then Singletary was another one. I think that's his name. Both of them decommitted from Florida. There's probably going to be more, from what I've heard, that there's probably going to be more people decommit from Florida, and so that probably means you're probably going to see even more Florida play, or not even more, but you're probably going to start seeing Florida players test the waters in the transfer portal and get out of there. And so you can kind of just read the room at this point. Like it seems like players are quitting on Dan Mullen already, which isn't a good thing halfway through the season when you're playing. And so if you go into Jacksonville and you just get absolutely throttled by your biggest rival in the sport, then you're really going to start seeing players quit on Dan Mullen. And it really seems like Dan Mullen has even maybe already quit on Florida possibly. Like he hasn't shown anything that shows that he still wants to be there and that he's fighting for his job right now. You don't see that urgency from him in his press conferences. He is not giving off the vibe of someone
his press conference. He's a clown in every single press conference, man.
Yeah. But he's not giving off the vibe of someone that is fighting for his job right now or someone that cares about keeping his job right now. He's just it looks like he's a guy going through the motions, just another football season, kind of how he's always looked at Florida. Like nothing really seems to be bothering him right now. He doesn't look fired up to be playing Georgia this week from what I've seen either. He doesn't you just don't see, I don't know. Energy is not high over there from what I can tell, just what you see on social media and whatnot. And then even from the fans, like I said this to my friend the other day, like, this is the calmest that I have ever seen Twitter for Georgia-Florida week. You don't usually you see guys going back and forth constantly about like, oh, this is why we're going to beat you, or like guys just going at each other's throats. I haven't seen anything like that at all. I've seen Georgia fans, of course, saying that they're going to throttle Florida. And
there's a combination of 2 things that go into that. The first thing is Florida's just really not that good this year, and I think Florida fans are really starting to realize that.
Yeah.
The other side of it is this is the unifier.
That's true too.
This right here has the entire southeastern corner on the same page this week. I mean, it's the World Series, man.
I mean, you essentially have the entire SEC conference together right now because there's not. I mean, aside from
until you get down in Florida, there's really no other teams in this corner.
Yeah,
and down there, But even a lot of Florida fans are Braves fans. Especially if they're in the Panhandle and stuff like that, up that direction, they're not that far. For making a trip up to Atlanta, that kind of thing. They grew up on it.
I mean, everybody in the Southeast, grew up watching the Atlanta Braves because that's who was on national television. So, the Braves have been a unifier of that. Everybody's got their team in the World Series right now. So that's who everybody's kind of joining together.
Most of my Twitter timeline is covered in that. There's still quite a few people on there that are all over football, which I'm all over football, to be honest. But I'm always all over football. But, man, I was 2 years old the last time the Braves even played in the World Series. It wasn't alive when they won the World Series in '95. So, and I know you weren't either.
Wasn't born.
You weren't even born when they last played.
Never even seen it at all.
That's what my focus is main on in the middle of the week. But, this is also game 2 tonight of the World Series. Braves up 1-0. So we'll see how that goes the rest of the week as well. And as we get into Friday, Saturday and stuff like that, I'm still going to be very focused on the Braves as well because it'll be going game 3, game 4 of that. But I'll be extremely focused on Georgia, Florida come Friday night, Saturday, that kind of thing, and ready to watch and get ready for that because I'm going down to Jacksonville myself too. So I'll be there. I'll be in that atmosphere, which is extremely fun to be there. So I'm more than thrilled about this game coming up. But my timeline from me and my social media comments about sports this week have definitely been focused around the Braves. And I think that's a lot of what it is on the Florida fan side too, because 1, the Braves, and 2, they suck.
Yeah, so the Florida fans can kind of thank the Braves right now for giving them a distraction from how horrible their football team has been performing this season. But going back to even circling back to the Dan Mullen topic, you're seeing fans start to turn on Dan Mullen. They're starting to realize okay, this guy is not the option for us as head coach because 1, fans were already skeptical of Dan Mullen because he's kept Todd Grantham around, and Georgia fans have been telling Florida fans about Todd Grantham for the last 5 or 6 years. Georgia fans know all about Todd Grantham.
As soon as he left and he went to Florida in the first place, everyone was like, thank God.
Yeah.
Not one single Georgia fan was upset about Todd Grantham going to Florida. And it's turned that we had the saying third and Grantham before he went to Florida.
Yeah. Florida fans did not
it got worse.
Third and Grantham.
They do now.
Yeah.
They get it now, especially after playing
much
Georgia a couple times with them and seeing how that, like, legitimately, the ones where Georgia won that game in Jacksonville, third and, like, longs is where Georgia lived.
I mean,
they made their money. Think about it, even when Fromm was here, I 1 year down in Jacksonville, I believe
it was 2019. He
had 2
unbelievable.
touchdown passes on third and, like, 15.
I think the dude was like 9 of 11 on third down.
Yeah.
2 touchdowns.
Yeah,
on third.
It was
and long.
unreal.
Yeah. So
we knew what it was when he left Georgia.
So that's one reason why Florida fans have already kind of quit on Dan Mullen. And then again, like LSU just came out this week, and I talked about this last week as well. They came out this week and said that they are not able to practice right now because they have so many people on the injury list, and Florida just lost to them. And it's kind of crazy. Yeah. So it's
bad.
It's very bad.
That's bad.
Yeah. So everybody's kind of realizing who Dan Mullen is at this point. And it's kind of who we've been saying Dan Mullen is this entire time. Like, the only people that are shocked about Dan Mullen right now are Florida fans. Everybody else from a distance watching that team could kind of tell, like, okay, yeah, he's an offensive guru. Like, that guy can draw up some legit offensive game plays. He's really good with his quarterbacks for the most part. But other than that, building a team, recruiting-wise, everything else outside of that, he doesn't do a good job at managing any of that. Managing coordinators on the recruiting trail, he doesn't seem to do a very solid job at that either. And it's all coming back to bite him in the butt right now.
He's done an okay job getting people through the transfer portal,
yes,
like over the past couple of seasons. But as far as actually recruiting like high school like kids coming into the school, he's done a very poor job at that. And that's why, like, I mean, I wasn't surprised when I heard this last year, that he was that he was almost looking for an NFL coordinator job in the offseason, which to me that was a bad look for him, coming out of your good season, right?
Yeah.
Where you lose in the SEC championship game because you took care of Georgia in the regular season. So that was your one chance to really get a shot at making something big of your season. And then you unravel late in the year and you end up with 4 losses, and then come and find out in the offseason that you're out here talking to people and sending out resumes and cover letters to NFL teams because you're trying to go to the NFL again. And there's 2 bad things about that. One, it's just a really, really bad look. And the other side that made it sense actually with it is, I mean, yeah, because you're struggling to do like the college coach side of things, like where you have to recruit, where you have to actually, keep your kids in line with, school and all these other things that come along with dealing with like young adults and dealing with it on that side. He doesn't do a very good job with it at all. And so, like, I mean, yeah, I think he would probably be better suited for an NFL coordinator position, an offensive coordinator somewhere. And there was speculation that he was at the Raiders game this weekend.
Yeah.
So, well, and they've got some turnover in their coach, and I don't think they would by any means give him a head coaching job, especially when they had John Gruden before that. They would definitely not give that man. But maybe they move some stuff around. Maybe their offensive coordinator gets promoted somewhere or moved around, and the Raiders look for a new OC. I don't know. But, I mean, I feel like he would do well in the NFL as a coordinator. He is a terrible, terrible head coach in college football, though. That is undeniable.
Yeah. It's just like I really don't know. And now you kind of wonder, where does Florida go? Like, how do you move on from this? Because a lot of people were saying that last year in their bowl game against Oklahoma, that was your look at what this team was going to be during this season. And it seems to be like that. It was exactly what, like, that was a look into what the 2021 season was holding for Florida, because Kyle Trask he got benched, but he didn't play the whole game. And then you had pretty much majority of your starters, your offensive starters, and some guys on defense not play. So, like, that was a look into, like, the guys that you're going to be playing next year. How are they going to perform? And it was ugly. It was horrible. Nothing looked sustainable for them. And it kind of just left you like, I don't know where we go from this, and I don't know what that means for us in the future, but it's not looking very good. And boy, oh boy, was that telling of them from last year. So now that you have 3 losses, and you're probably going to take another loss this week, just nothing looks good for Florida. And so hopefully you all you can do as a Florida fan is hope and pray that they hit on the next head coaching hire. They can kind of clean house on some coordinators and whatnot, and really get things going on the recruiting trail first and foremost. That's something that Kirby Smart emphasized when he first got to Georgia. I mean, his first complete recruiting class in 2017, it was unreal. I mean, he really got the energy going very quickly and got momentum built on the recruiting show early on in his head coaching career at Georgia. And that's the reason why his team is so sustainable now and why they've maintained success every single year, because he has emphasized getting the most elite talent that he can, locking down in-state, which is another thing that Florida has not been able to do, is lock down in-state talent. I mean, Georgia was getting majority of Georgia,
Pulled
Alabama,
the state of Florida. They completely pulled the state.
Everybody
of
was
Florida
going into Florida and just picking everybody out of their home state.
Mm-hmm.
So they didn't lock down his home state. He wasn't getting the guys that he should be getting. Georgia locks down the Georgia kids every single year. I mean, last year I think Kirby Smart landed like something ridiculous, like 14 of the top 20 kids in the state, something crazy like that. And he's doing the same thing this year.
I think like it was like 14 of like the first 16 players that Georgia had commit were Georgia guys.
Yeah.
Like last year was some ridiculous number. And yeah, last year, like that's what Kirby has done a phenomenal job doing, and just Mullen's unable to do so. Like he's unable to do that, and it's just getting worse and worse and worse. And but you're exactly right. That's the difference between these two coaches, and that's why Georgia is still successful this year in with all of the stuff that's going on and all of the adversity that they're facing as far as injuries have been to start the year on that offensive side, and yet they still score as many points a game as they do. It's because of that depth that he's recruited for years at this point, 5-6 years of constant top 5, recruiting classes. Dan Mullen can't get that type of recruiting class one year, much less every single year. And when you lose like 2 or 3 Heisman candidate, type players, or I won't even say 2 or 3 out, like 1 or 2 maybe, when you start looking at Pitts could have made an argument because he was just incredible at that position. And then, Trask was a Heisman candidate. When you lose those guys, lose a few extra offensive pieces at the same time, you're unable to respond and rebound from that if you didn't have that insane depth. Georgia is a very different team because of their recruiting, and the injuries are essentially the same as these players that had left for Florida, because they just were able to plug in the next guy and take over for him. But guess what? As we get down this stretch, more and more of these players that have been out for the entire year or most of the year or gone down recently or something like that, they'll be back towards the end of the season. Mm-hmm. So if Georgia goes over this Florida hump right here, again, it will be a scary Georgia team the rest of the way. And that's something that Dan Mullen can't put together.
Yeah. And I'll kind of tie this into the Braves. We'll kind of keep it on topic for like World Series going on and Georgia football going on at the same time. We'll kind of tie them in together. So Kirby Smart kind of has that Alex Anthopoulos mentality. That's kind of how I see it. This year, both teams have dealt with a lot of injuries. Mike Soroka goes down for the Braves. That's the ace, the number 1 pitcher for the Braves, goes down. Achilles injury, he's done for the year. Acuna midway through the year, done, tears his ACL. And you could have seen that team just kind of roll over and say, all right, we'll just focus on next year. We'll get ready. We'll get our guys back next year. We'll regroup, and then we'll make our run at the World Series. Instead, Alex Anthopoulos goes and gets Eddie Rosario, Jock Peterson, and Adam Duvall, and all 3 have hit, and it's the reason why the Braves are in the World Series right now. I mean, Eddie Rosario was the NLCS MVP for the Braves. So Kirby Smart does the same thing. George Pickens, before the season even starts, goes down, tears his ACL. But Kirby Smart, being who he is, he goes in the transfer portal. Last year he goes and gets JT Daniels after already having Jamie Newman at quarterback. JT Daniels is one of the biggest reasons, even though he's been hurt, he's been a major reason why this team is being so successful. He goes and gets Darian Kendrick from Clemson in the transfer portal. He's been a major part of this team. He goes and gets Tyke Smith out of the transfer portal. Yes, he's done for the year. Haven't seen much of him at all. But still, Kirby Smart and Alex Anthopoulos have very similar mentalities of I don't care what's going on. I believe in this team. I'm going to make this team the best that I possibly can. And every year we're making a run for the national title or the World Series. We don't care about anything else. It's that killer mentality that both of those guys have that you don't see from Dan Mullen. So,
absolutely. And to tie into that, as well as not only is it just going out and getting these players on there, but think about exactly what you just said. Yeah, he went out and got a couple players that haven't been able to play. Think about Eric Gilbert. That was supposed to help the offense with
another
injuries,
one, yes.
And he hasn't been able to play either. And then you have Tyke Smith, who hasn't really played at all either since he's come over for Georgia. But guess what? The change, the deciding factor of the season has been, and the recovery of it is not going out and getting more players on top of it, but it's developing the players that you have.
Mm-hmm.
Latavius Burnett is insane this year. It was beginning to become a conversation of, was Tyke Smith going to be able to get on the field again that much? Like, he was going to play.
Back.
Exactly. He was going to play again. Don't get me wrong. He was going to have to steal those minutes back from Latavius Burnett because of how well he has played. That's development. You have Eric Gilbert going away, and so you have to kind of balance your offense, which he was coming in technically as like a wide receiver, not a tight end in that spot. Mm-hmm. Well, guess what? You go out and you have A.D. Mitchell, who's a true freshman out here, just absolutely going off. You have Ladd McConkey, who's a redshirt freshman, coming in and absolutely going off this year. You have Brock Bowers, as a true freshman again, absolutely going off on that side of the ball because they're getting taught and they're getting into the game immediately and making a difference at this point. And you have other guys, in that wide receiver room that have really stepped up as well with all of the injuries. There are names out there that you shouldn't have even known this year that we just talked about. And you shouldn't even know who those players are. Like, A.D. Mitchell shouldn't be on the field. I think he would have gone on the field anyways. But, like, he shouldn't have been out there that much this year. Ladd McConkey sure shouldn't be out there that much this year. He was a walk-on originally. And I'm sure he'll be on scholarship at the end of the season, don't get me wrong. But he was a walk-on. 3-star. A.D. Mitchell was a 3-star. When you have players like George Pickens, you have Avery Gilbert coming in. You have, Darnell's played well now that he's healthy too. He's getting more involved. Brock Bowers is going off at that position as well. The offense on the wide receiver side of things, you really shouldn't be seeing some of these players play that much this year. You really shouldn't be. But guess what you are, and guess what they're going off. The player development for Kirby Smart is the biggest difference maker at this point, on top of his recruiting and depth that he has. Because, guess what? There's a lot of 3-stars out there that are doing a lot of damage on this team, not just the 5-stars.
Yeah, and you're seeing Georgia players pick up the slack, or not necessarily even the slack, but they're coming in and they're delivering when you need them to. And it's the same thing that you've seen with the Braves. Acuna was having a MVP caliber season before he got hurt. Well, then Austin Riley now went on an absolute tear after Acuna got hurt, and now he's in the conversation for NL MVP. Yep. You've seen all of their pitchers pick up the slack. Charlie Morton, until he broke his leg last night, which
threw 16 more pitches on a broken fibula,
absolutely
and
insane.
Struck Jose Altuve out with a broken right leg, which is his push-off leg.
Yeah,
that's the one he pushes off to give all his power. And his last fastball was like 96 miles an hour. No big deal. Sorry, that needed to be said.
Good.
That had to be said.
He's been delivering. Max Fried, he's been delivering. And then even the bullpen. The bullpen was a big struggle for the Braves throughout the entire season. But then late in the year, you saw guys like Luke Jackson, A.J. Minter, Tyler Matzik, who, my gosh, has been absolutely on fire this postseason and even this entire season. And now Will Smith, who a lot of people had a big issue with Will Smith throughout the season, he's been absolutely locked down in the postseason. It's things like that.
He's figured some stuff out for sure.
That take a championship that it takes to be a championship team. The Braves have figured it out, and Georgia has figured it out. And those two teams, I've been comparing them this year because they're so similar in a lot of things.
The adversity they faced is very similar. Yeah.
And they have just absolutely trucked over adversity and just said, why not us? We're going to go do this thing because that's what we came into the season trying to do.
I think that last comment right there is perfect for it. And I doubt Kirby says this himself, but I'm sure he would use it if he thought of it or somebody said it too. Is why not us?
Yep.
Why not this Georgia team? Who's going to stop us? They're not going to right now. Like, I think it's that comment. I really do like that one. Is why not this team? Why not the Braves? Why not Georgia this year? And I think that this is the last true test on the regular season before they go up against Tennessee, Charleston Southern, and Georgia Tech.
And
Missouri. This is the last one that's an actual test. And I think Georgia's going to walk away with it on there too. But if they get past this game, at that point, you've got to think that, like, first of all, you should already know this is a very special Georgia team.
No doubt.
Very special Georgia team. And if they get past this game with all the stuff that's been going on and make that one more step, that last big step to get towards the end of this season, into the last quarter of the season, you've got to know that this is by far, something special that you're watching and just really enjoy it on there. So, but with all of that being said, I think we've got a good wrap up spot on there, and I'll let you start. What's your score prediction of this Georgia-Florida game down in Jacksonville?
All week I've been sitting around the same number. I think it's going to be 38-7 Georgia. I think it's an absolute beatdown from the Dogs. I think they're just going to
close to what I'm going to say.
I think they're just going to jump out on them early, get ahead early, and Florida's just going to kind of roll over and just not put up much of an effort for the remainder of the game because they're just going to step on their neck early. and just squash the bug or something, just absolutely kill them and kill any momentum at all that they're coming into this game with, or not momentum, but, energy or adrenaline. Just kill that off right off to the start. And I think they're just going to go on a big win and head into the last part of the season with a 38-7 victory in Jacksonville.
Well, you've kind of convinced me to go a little bit more aggressive on my pick by the end of this conversation. I was going to be a little bit more conservative on like the scoring for Georgia on this. My prediction for Florida's wasn't really going to change, but my prediction for how many points Georgia scores has shifted since the beginning of this conversation for sure. I think Florida's going to score probably 6 points. I don't think they score a touchdown necessarily. I think it's going to be like a couple field goals they can get, or potentially a 10-point game for them. They may get to 10. If they do get that touchdown, I think they'll get another field goal somewhere in there. But I kind of lean towards that 6 point for them. But for Georgia, I think they're going to score like 42. Mm-hmm. I think they're going to go a little bit more because I really do. Kirby's got that mentality, man. I really feel like he's going to want to make a point this year that Florida was a fluke last year. Yeah. I think he's going to really want to just throw all the cards down on the table and just say, here it is. And so I think I'll say 42-6 or 42-10 if they get in the end zone. If they score a touchdown, it'll be 42-10. That's my prediction on there. Anything you want to add to that?
Nope, I'm good to go, man.
Awesome.
I've vented everything that I've wanted to. So,
well, as always, keep it classy in the Classic City. It's time for us to go check out this Braves game because guess what? They just might be those, as Jock Peterson would say,
those MFers.
Those MFers. So go Dogs, go Braves. We'll catch you guys next week.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Dogs Daily on Sports Illustrated. Take a second to subscribe, rate, review, and share with your friends and family. Feel free to reach out to the Dogs Daily crew on Twitter with any topics you'd like discussed. You can reach out to Jeremiah at Jeremiah_Stod7, to Kyle at DK Fubderberg, and Jonathan at 22_Jman. Check back next week for a brand new episode. In the meantime, go Dogs!